The lecture hall buzzed with quiet conversations as students from 17 different species settled into their seats for Xenobiology 301. One of the most popular courses at Galactic University. Kevin Martinez sat near the middle of the room. His standard issue datapad balanced on his knee as he reviewed the previous week's notes on predator classifications across the known galaxy. He was one of only 4 humans enrolled at the university this semester, part of the first exchange program since Earth had joined the galactic community 3 years earlier. Professor Velkthor glided into the room on 6 elegant legs, his crystalline carapace reflecting the soft blue lighting that most species found comfortable. The Centaurian had been teaching xenobiology for nearly 3 centuries, and his reputation for brilliant lectures had spread across multiple star systems. "Good morning, class." The professor's voice resonated through the translation devices everyone wore. "Today, we continue our examination of predatory behaviors and hunting patterns." Kevin straightened in his seat. His interest immediately piqued. He had grown up in the mountains of Montana, where hunting was not just a sport, but a way of life, a tradition passed down through generations of his family. As we have discussed in previous sessions, Professor Velkthar began pulling up holographic displays of various alien creatures. All predatory species across the galaxy follow distinct seasonal hunting patterns. The hologram shifted, showing a massive furred creature from a frozen world. The Carveth of Sigma Primax, for example, hunt only during the 3-month winter period when their primary prey migrates across the ice plains. Another image appeared. This time, a sleek reptilian hunter. The Scarlex enter a hunting phase during their planet's dry season, storing excess nutrition for the remaining months when prey becomes scarce. Professor Velkthar's 4 primary eyes swept across the classroom. This pattern holds true for every single predatory species we have cataloged across 2,000 worlds. Which brings me to today's central thesis. No species hunts year-round. Kevin felt his eyebrows rise. The professor continued, warming to his subject. The biological cost of maintaining a constant hunting metabolism would be catastrophic for any species, requiring caloric intake that would quickly deplete available prey populations and lead to ecosystem collapse. Several students nodded, their various appendages moving in gestures of agreement. Furthermore, the professor added, the evolutionary pressure would be unsustainable, because constant predation would eliminate the recovery periods necessary for prey species to reproduce, ultimately causing the predator's own extinction through resource depletion. Kevin's hand went up almost automatically. Professor Velkthar paused mid-gesture, his antennae twitching with what Kevin had learned to recognize as curiosity mixed with mild annoyance at being interrupted. "Yes, Student Martinez?" "I'm sorry to disagree, Professor," Kevin said respectfully, "but humans hunt year-round." The classroom went absolutely silent. Even the usual background hum of whispered translations seemed to stop. Professor Velkthar's carapace shifted colors slightly, displaying patterns that Kevin's crash course in Centaurian body language suggested indicated polite skepticism. "Perhaps you misunderstand the terminology, young human," the professor said kindly. "I am referring to active predatory pursuit of prey species, not merely the consumption of stored food or the gathering of non-mobile resources." "I understand, Professor," Kevin replied, keeping his tone respectful but firm. "I mean actual hunting where we track, pursue, and harvest prey animals, and we do it in spring, summer, fall, and winter." A ripple of movement went through the class as students turned to look at Kevin. Lisa Chang, another human student sitting 2 rows ahead, turned around and caught his eye with an expression that clearly said, "This is going to be interesting." Professor Velkthar's antennae quivered. "That seems extraordinarily unlikely from a biological standpoint," he said, though his tone had shifted from dismissive to genuinely curious. What possible evolutionary advantage would drive such behavior? Kevin thought about his grandfather's words. Lessons learned during long autumn days in the high country. Humans evolved on a planet with extreme environmental variations. He explained, "Our prey species don't all migrate at once or hibernate simultaneously. Different animals are available in different seasons. So we adapted to hunt whatever was available whenever it was available." One of the insectoid students in the front row clicked its mandibles rapidly. A sign of agitation that Kevin had learned meant confusion or distress. But the metabolic cost, Professor Velkthar protested, though he now sounded more intrigued than dismissive. "How does your species maintain the necessary energy levels for continuous predatory behavior?" "We're persistence hunters," Kevin said, remembering a documentary he had watched about human evolution. "Our bodies are built for endurance rather than speed. We can regulate our temperature through sweating, which lets us pursue prey for hours or even days until it collapses from exhaustion." The classroom erupted in a cacophony of sounds as every species present began talking, and once Professor Velkthar raised two of his upper appendages, calling for silence. "This is a rather extraordinary claim. Student Martinez," he said carefully, "do you have evidence to support this assertion?" Kevin nodded. "I can provide historical records, cultural documentation, and biological analysis," he offered. "My home region alone has designated hunting seasons for deer, elk, bear, waterfowl, upland birds, and various small game species that span all 12 months of our year." Lisa's hand shot up. "I can corroborate," she called out without waiting to be acknowledged, her military background showing in her direct approach. "My family has hunting records going back 6 generations in the Pacific Northwest. I did 2 years of wilderness survival training where year-round hunting skills were essential." Professor Velkthar's carapace was now cycling through colors Kevin had never seen before, which he suspected meant the Centaurian equivalent of deep thought mixed with concern. "Class," the professor said slowly, "I believe we have stumbled upon a significant gap in our xenobiological database. Student Martinez, I would very much like to review your evidence. And if what you say is accurate, this has rather profound implications." Kevin heard the unspoken question in those words. What kind of world produces predators that never stop hunting? "I'll compile everything I can access through the university's Earth database," Kevin promised. "Please do," Professor Velkthar said, his teaching rhythm clearly disrupted. "In fact, I think this warrants a full departmental review. Would you be willing to present your findings to a broader audience?" Kevin glanced at Lisa, who gave him an encouraging nod. "Of course, Professor." As the class ended and students filed out in unusual silence, Kevin noticed how many of them gave him a wider berth than usual, their various gazes lingering on him with something that looked uncomfortably like wariness. Lisa fell into step beside him as they walked down the corridor. "You just made every alien in that room realize they've been sharing a campus with apex persistence predators," she said quietly. "I just answered a question honestly," Kevin replied, but he felt a knot forming in his stomach. "True," Lisa agreed. "But now they're going to start asking what it means that humans come from a world so competitive that we had to become hunters who never rest." Kevin looked back at the lecture hall where Professor Velkthar stood motionless, his holographic display still showing the seasonal hunters of other worlds. The professor seemed to be staring at nothing, and Kevin wondered what calculations were running through that brilliant ancient mind. Whatever came next, Kevin realized, was going to change how the galaxy saw humanity. He just hoped it would be a change for the better. Kevin spent the next 3 days buried in the university's Earth database, pulling up everything he could find about human hunting practices across history and cultures. His Small dormitory room had become a command center of holographic displays showing ancient cave paintings, historical records, and modern wildlife management data. Lisa stopped by on the second evening with coffee and moral support. "How's the research going?" she asked, handing him a steaming cup. "It's overwhelming," Kevin admitted, gesturing at the floating displays. "I'm trying to organize thousands of years of hunting tradition into something Professor Velkthar can understand." Lisa studied a hologram showing persistent hunters from the Kalahari Desert. "You know what's going to freak them out most?" she said thoughtfully. "It's not just that we hunt year-round. It's that we developed completely different techniques for every season and climate." Kevin nodded slowly. "You're right. That shows adaptation and planning at a level they might not expect." "Exactly," Lisa said. "Other predators follow instinct during their hunting season, but humans invented specialized tools and strategies for every possible situation." Brandon Cole knocked on the open door frame, the third-year engineering student carrying his own data pad. "Heard you were putting together something that's making the biology department nervous," he said with a grin. "Thought it might help from the engineering angle." Kevin waved him in. "What angle is that?" Brandon pulled up his own holographic display. "Weapons technology," he said simply. "I've been cataloging human hunting tools across history, and the progression is kind of terrifying when you lay it out chronologically." The display showed a timeline starting with sharpened stones and progressing through spears, atlatls, bows, crossbows, firearms, and modern compound weapons. Every single one of these represents humans solving the problem of how to kill something more efficiently. Brandon explained. "We've spent our entire evolutionary history getting better at hunting." Lisa leaned forward, showing him the specialization chart. Brandon switched displays, and Kevin felt his stomach tighten. The new hologram showed different weapon types organized by prey species, terrain, season, and distance. "We have weapons specifically designed for hunting in snow," Brandon said. "Different weapons for forests versus open plains. Specialized equipment for hunting at night. Gear made specifically for tracking in rain. And that's not even getting into the cultural variations." Kevin rubbed his eyes. "When you put it all together like this, it does look pretty intense. It looks like an arms race against nature itself," Lisa said quietly. "And humanity won." A chime at the door announced another visitor. Professor Velkthar stood in the hallway, his carapace showing colors of polite request. "Student Martinez, I hope I am not intruding," the professor said. "I wanted to check on your progress." Kevin gestured him inside. Though the small room became crowded with the Centaurian six-legged frame, Professor Velkthar's multiple eyes scanned the holographic displays, and his antennae went very still. "This is just preliminary organization," Kevin said quickly. "I'm still sorting through the data." "You have hunting records from how many different human cultures?" the professor asked, his voice carrying an odd tone. Brandon checked his pad. "Current count is 47 distinct cultural groups spanning 6 continents and approximately 12,000 years." Professor Velkthar's carapace shifted through several color patterns in rapid succession. "And all of them show year-round hunting activity?" "Every single one," Lisa confirmed. "The specific prey and methods vary by region and available resources, but the pattern holds everywhere humans settled." The professor moved closer to the timeline display. "May I?" he asked, reaching toward the controls. Kevin nodded. "And Professor." Velkthar began scrolling through the data with practiced ease. Several minutes passed in silence as the ancient scholar absorbed the information. "I have made a terrible miscalculation," he finally said, his voice subdued. "Professor?" Kevin asked uncertainly. "I assumed," Velkthar continued, still studying the displays, "that your initial statement was perhaps cultural exaggeration or a misunderstanding of terms." But this data suggests something far more significant. He turned to face the three humans directly. Your species did not simply adapt to hunt year-round. You evolved in an environment so hostile and competitive that continuous predation was necessary for survival. Brandon nodded slowly. Earth has 5 major extinction events in its fossil record, he said. And that's not counting the smaller die-offs. The planet kept trying to kill everything. And humans evolved during one of the harshest climatic periods. Professor Velkthar's antennae quivered. I need to consult with my colleagues, he said. Student Martinez, would you be available to present these findings to the full biology department in 3 days? Of course, Kevin agreed, though he felt increasingly nervous about where this was heading after the professor left. The 3 humans sat in an uncomfortable silence. You realize what just happened, right? Brandon said eventually. The professor figured out Earth is a death world. Lisa replied. Kevin shook his head. It's more than that. He realized that humans are the product of a death world, which means we're not just survivors. We're the apex predators of one of the most dangerous planets in the known galaxy. Lisa pulled up a star chart showing Earth's classification in the Galactic Community's database, Class 12 Death World. She read, high gravity, extreme temperature variations, aggressive microbial life, frequent natural disasters, and an ecosystem characterized by intense predator-prey competition. And we're the species that came out on top of that ecosystem, Brandon added, by becoming predators who never stop hunting. Kevin thought about his grandfather teaching him to track deer through fresh snow, explaining how to read the forest and understand animal behavior. Those lessons had seemed so normal, so wholesome. But now he was seeing them through alien eyes. A veteran hunter training the next generation in skills honed over thousands of years of continuous predation. Do you think they're scared of us? He asked quietly. Lisa considered the question carefully. I think they're trying to figure out what it means to have a species like us in the galactic community, she said. We're friendly and cooperative. But we're also persistence predators who evolved to never give up, never stop, and constantly innovate new ways to hunt. Brandon started packing up his data. For what it's worth, he said, I think your presentation is going to be important, not just for the biology department, but for human-alien relations in general. How so? Kevin asked. Because you have a chance to show them that humans are more than just scary predators, Brandon explained. You can show them that our hunting heritage also taught us about conservation, respect for nature, and sustainable resource management. Lisa smiled. He's right. Modern humans are some of the best conservationists in known space. And that knowledge came directly from our hunting background. After his friends left, Kevin sat alone with the holographic displays casting shifting light across his room in 3 days. He would stand before some of the galaxy's leading xenobiologists and explain what it meant to be human, to be a species that never stopped hunting, but that also learned to protect and preserve. He pulled up one more file, a quote from an ancient human philosopher about the relationship between predator and prey. Hunter and hunted, the words felt right for what he needed to convey. But he knew the real challenge would be making the aliens understand that humanity's greatest strength was not just the hunt itself, but the wisdom gained from thousands of generations of hunters who learned to think like their prey, to understand the cycles of nature, and ultimately to become stewards rather than just consumers. The galaxy was about to learn something new about humans, and Kevin hoped they would understand the full picture, not just the dangerous parts. The auditorium held 200 beings from 40 different species, all members of the Galactic University's biology and xenology departments. Kevin stood at the podium, his presentation materials loaded and ready. While Professor Velkthar made introductions to the assembled scholars, Lisa and Brandon sat in the front row for moral support, both looking far more confident than Kevin felt. Thank you all for coming, Professor Velkthar said to the crowd. 3 days ago, one of my students challenged a fundamental assumption about predatory behavior. And what we have discovered since then has profound implications for our understanding of human evolution. He gestured toward Kevin with two of his upper appendages. Student Martinez will present his findings. Kevin took a deep breath and activated the first holographic display. Thank you. Professor, he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. I'm here today to discuss human hunting patterns and what makes my species unique among known predators. The first image showed Earth rotating slowly, with climate zones highlighted. Humans evolved on a planet with extreme seasonal variations, multiple climate zones, and an ecosystem characterized by intense competition, Kevin explained. Our evolutionary response was to become adaptable persistence predators capable of hunting in any environment. During any season, a Deltharian scholar in the third row raised a tentacle. But surely your species must have preferred hunting periods based on prey availability. Kevin shook his head. That's exactly the point. Our prey species have different availability patterns. So while one species might be scarce in winter, another becomes available. We adapted to hunt whatever was present. He pulled up the next display, showing human thermoregulation. Humans have an unusual cooling system called sweating, he continued. We can maintain pursuit of prey for hours or even days because we don't overheat like most predators. There are documented cases of human hunters tracking prey for over 8 hours in extreme heat until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Uncomfortable shifting rippled through the audience. Brandon had helped him prepare this next section, and Kevin knew it would be the most impactful. Now, I'd like to show you something that demonstrates human adaptation to year-round hunting, he said. Switching to a new display, the hologram showed a vast room filled with weapons, tools, and equipment from across human history. This is the International Hunting Heritage Museum on Earth, Kevin explained. I have a colleague standing by to give us a virtual tour. The hologram shifted to show Greg Patterson, a human historian standing in the museum's main hall. Hello, everyone, Greg said cheerfully, apparently unbothered by addressing an auditorium full of alien scholars. Welcome to human hunting history. He began walking through the displays. What you're looking at represents approximately 50,000 years of continuous innovation in hunting technology. Greg explained, these early tools are carved stone points, used for hunting large game during the Ice Ages. The camera followed him to the next section. Here we have spears from various cultures. Notice the different designs. Some are for throwing, some for thrusting, some specifically weighted for use in water while fishing. Kevin watched the alien audience. Many were leaning forward now, focused intently on the display. Greg moved to a wall covered in bows and arrows. Archery technology shows fascinating regional variation, he said. Short recurve bows for mounted hunting, long bows for distance, crossbows for power, each designed for specific hunting situations and prey types. A Centauran scholar stood up abruptly. How many different weapon types have humans developed for hunting? She asked, her voice carrying clear distress. Greg consulted a datapad. We have cataloged over 300 distinct hunting weapon designs. And that's just the major categories, if we count regional variations and specialized tools. The number exceeds 2,000. Stunned silence filled the auditorium. Greg continued his tour, moving through rooms dedicated to traps, snares, nets, and tracking equipment. This section shows winter hunting gear, he said, gesturing at snowshoes, insulated clothing, and specialized weapons. And over here is equipment specifically designed for hunting in tropical climates, desert environments, mountain terrain, and coastal regions. Kevin stepped back to the podium. What the museum demonstrates is that humans didn't just hunt year-round. We innovated constantly to improve our hunting capabilities in every possible environment. He pulled up a chart showing human migration patterns. As humans spread across Earth, we encountered new climates, new prey species, and new challenges, Kevin explained. In every single case, we developed new hunting techniques and tools to adapt. Professor Velkthar stood from his seat in the front row. Student Martinez, may I ask a question? Of course, Professor. You have shown us extensive evidence of human hunting capability, Velkthar said carefully. But what drove this continuous innovation? Most predators develop adequate hunting skills and then plateau. Why did humans keep improving? Kevin had thought about this question during his research, because on Earth, adequate wasn't enough to survive, he replied. Our planet experienced rapid climate changes. Prey species evolved defensive adaptations, and we competed with other predator species. We had to keep innovating or face extinction. Lisa raised her hand, and Kevin nodded to her. I'd like to add something from a military perspective, she said, standing. The persistence and adaptability that humans developed for hunting transferred directly to other aspects of our society, including warfare, exploration, and problem-solving. She pulled up her own data on her personal device, projecting it alongside Kevin's displays. Human military history shows the same pattern of continuous innovation and refusal to accept defeat, Lisa continued. We don't give up, we adapt, we find new approaches. We outlast opposition through sheer persistence. A murmur went through the crowd, and Kevin could sense the mood shifting from academic curiosity to something approaching concern. Dean Cormix, the university administrator, stood up from the back row. What you're describing, the dean said slowly, is a species that evolved under such extreme pressure that stopping or resting meant death. Kevin nodded. That's accurate. But it's important to understand the full context. He switched to his final set of displays. Modern humans are also some of the most effective conservationists in known space. Kevin said, we learned through generations of hunting that preserving prey populations and habitats is essential for long-term survival. Greg chimed in from Earth. The same cultures that develop sophisticated hunting techniques also develop sustainable harvest practices, seasonal restrictions, and habitat preservation, he added. Human hunters were among the first conservationists because we understood that destroying our prey base meant destroying ourselves. Kevin showed images of restored ecosystems, protected wildlife reserves, and successful species recovery programs. Hunting taught humans to think long-term, to understand ecosystem dynamics, and to balance harvest with preservation, he explained. Yes, we're persistent predators who never stop hunting, but we're also a species that learn to protect what we hunt. The auditorium was quiet as the scholars processed this information. Professor Velkthar's carapace showed colors Kevin had learned meant deep thought. You have given us much to consider. Student Martinez, the professor said finally, I believe the biology department needs to completely revise our understanding of human evolution and capabilities. Dean Kermix nodded. I'm calling an emergency faculty meeting for tomorrow, he announced. We need to discuss the implications of these findings for human integration into the galactic community. As the crowd began to disperse, Kevin noticed how many scholars avoided eye contact with him. Lisa and Brandon came down to the podium. Well, Brandon said, you definitely made an impression. I think I scared them. Kevin replied quietly. You showed them the truth, Lisa corrected. What they do with that information is up to them. Professor Velkthar approached, his movements slower than usual. It was an excellent presentation, he said, and deeply troubling. I'm sorry if, Kevin began, but the professor raised an appendage. Don't apologize for your nature, Velkthar said. I am troubled because I realize how little we truly understood about humanity, and I wonder what other misconceptions we carry. Kevin looked at his professor with new respect. "Would you like to learn more?" he asked. The Centaurian's antennae quivered in what Kevin now recognized as a smile. "Very much so," Professor Velkthar replied. "But perhaps we should start with understanding rather than fear." Kevin nodded. Feeling a small measure of hope, the galaxy had just learned that humans were apex persistence predators who never stopped hunting. But maybe, just maybe, they could also learn that humanity's greatest strength was not just the hunt, but the wisdom that came from it. The emergency faculty meeting took place in the university's largest conference chamber, a circular room designed to accommodate the diverse physical requirements of multiple species. Kevin had not expected to be invited, but Dean Carmix had insisted that human perspective was essential for the discussion. He sat between Lisa and Brandon in the observation gallery, while below them 50 of the galaxy's leading xenobiologists, anthropologists, and policy advisors debated humanity's place in the galactic community. Professor Velkthar stood at the central podium, his carapace displaying formal academic colors. "Colleagues, we must address what yesterday's presentation revealed about human evolution," he began. "We have been operating under dangerously incomplete information." A Crinarian professor spoke up, her voice translator rendering her clicks and whistles into standard galactic. "Incomplete is an understatement," she said sharply. "We invited a species of apex persistence predators into our academic institutions without understanding their fundamental nature." Brandon leaned over to whisper to Kevin, "This is going to get ugly." Professor Velkthar raised his appendages for calm. "Let us approach this scientifically," he said. "I have compiled an analysis of human hunting behavior and its implications." A holographic display appeared showing Earth's classification, alongside other known predator species. Humans are the only documented species that hunts continuously across all seasons. Velkthar explained. This indicates several things about their evolutionary environment. He pulled up comparative data. First, Earth's ecosystem was extraordinarily competitive, requiring constant predation for species survival. Second, prey species were diverse enough to provide year-round hunting opportunities. And third, humans developed cognitive abilities sophisticated enough to adapt hunting strategies to any situation. Elderly Deltharian scholar raised a tentacle. "What concerns me most is the innovation rate," he said gravely. "Most predator species develop hunting techniques through instinct over millions of years. But humans consciously innovate new methods within single generations." The hologram shifted to show the timeline Brandon had compiled, over 50,000 years. Humans went from using sharpened stones to weapons capable of killing at extreme distances with minimal physical exertion. The Deltharian continued. "That rate of advancement is unprecedented and frankly alarming." Lisa's jaw tightened, and Kevin could see her struggling to stay quiet. Dean Carmix spoke from his elevated platform. "The question before us is whether humanity's predatory nature poses a threat to galactic stability." "That's not a fair framing," a voice called out. Everyone turned to see Nicole Harper, a human xenobiology consultant who had arrived from the Galactic Council, standing in the doorway. "May I address the assembly?" she asked. Dean Carmix. Dean gestured assent, and Nicole made her way to the podium. "I've been listening to this discussion, and while I appreciate the scientific rigor, you're missing crucial context," Nicole said firmly. "Yes, humans are persistence predators from a Class 12 death world. Yes, we hunt year-round, and yes, we innovate constantly. But you're treating these facts as if they exist in isolation." She pulled up her own data. "Let me show you Earth's conservation record," Nicole continued. "In the last 2 centuries, humans have brought 17 species back from the brink of extinction, established protected habitats covering millions of square kilometers, and developed sustainable resource management practices that are now taught across the galaxy." Professor Velkthar's antennae quivered. How is this relevant to the discussion of human predatory nature? Because our predatory nature is exactly what made us effective conservationists, Nicole replied. Hunters understand prey populations, migration patterns, breeding cycles, and ecosystem balance better than any outside observer could, because we had to understand these things to survive. She highlighted specific data points. Human hunters were the first to recognize when prey populations were declining. They advocated for seasonal restrictions, habitat protection, and sustainable harvest numbers. Not out of altruism, but because they understood that destroying the prey base meant destroying their own future. A Centaurian scholar stood, but the capacity for such predation still exists. She argued, what prevents humans from applying those same persistent hunting techniques to conquest or expansion? Before Nicole could respond, Ambassador Kyle Morrison entered the chamber. May I address that question? He asked. Dean Kermix looked uncomfortable, but nodded. Ambassador Morrison moved to stand beside Nicole. I represent humanity in the Galactic Council, and I understand your concerns, he said calmly. You've just learned that humans evolved as apex predators on one of the galaxy's most dangerous worlds. And now you're wondering what that means for species that didn't have to fight for every meal. He looked around the room, making eye contact with multiple scholars. Here's what it means. Humans understand survival in ways that species from gentler worlds might not. We know what it's like to face extinction, to struggle against impossible odds, and to adapt or die. The ambassador pulled up humanity's short history in the galactic community. In 3 years of galactic membership, humans have participated in 14 scientific collaborations, resolved 2 territorial disputes through mediation, and contributed to 5 humanitarian aid missions, Morrison continued. Does that sound like a conquest-oriented species to you? The Cronarian professor spoke again, but the potential exists, she insisted. A species that evolved to never stop hunting, to innovate constantly, to persist through any hardship. That same species could be unstoppable in warfare. You're absolutely right, Lisa said. Standing up in the observation gallery, all eyes turned to her. Student Chang. This is a closed faculty meeting, Dean Kermix began. But Ambassador Morrison waved him off. Let her speak. Lisa made her way down to the main floor. I served in Earth's planetary defense forces before coming here, she said. So I can tell you exactly what you're worried about. Yes. Human military capability is formidable. Yes. Our refusal to surrender or accept defeat makes us dangerous opponents. And yes, our innovation in weapons technology continues. The room went very quiet. But here's what you're not understanding, Lisa continued. That same persistence and adaptability means we're also the best allies you could have. When we commit to something, we don't give up. When we make friends, we protect them with the same intensity we'd hunt prey. And when we join a community, we invest in its success. Brandon stood up in the gallery. Can I add something? Dean Kermix seemed to have given up on controlling the meeting. Go ahead. Brandon came down to join Lisa and Kevin. I'm an engineering student, and I've been studying comparative technology development, he said. Yes, humans are really good at making weapons, but we're equally good at making tools for construction, medicine, agriculture, and exploration. He projected his own research. For every weapon technology humans developed, we created 3 peaceful applications, Brandon explained. The same precision that makes accurate hunting weapons makes surgical instruments. The same innovation that improves spears led to better farming implements. And the same persistence that makes us good hunters makes us excellent researchers. Professor Velkthar had been quiet throughout these exchanges, his color shifting thoughtfully. I believe, he said slowly, that we have been looking at this situation incorrectly. The room turned to him. We have been treating human predatory nature as a liability, a danger to be contained or feared, Velkthar continued. But perhaps it is simply a difference to be understood and respected. He moved to the center of the floor. Every species brings unique capabilities to the galactic community based on their evolutionary history. The Deltharians bring patience cultivated over long lifespans. The Centaurians bring crystalline memory that preserves knowledge perfectly. The Chronarians bring collective decision-making that considers multiple perspectives. His carapace brightened. Humans bring persistence, adaptability, and the hard-won wisdom of survivors from a death world, Velkthar said. These traits make them formidable, yes, but they also make them valuable. Nicole smiled. Thank you. Professor, Dean Kermix rose from his seat. I believe we need more time to process this information, he said. But I propose we shift our approach from threat assessment to cultural understanding. The Chronarian professor, who had been most vocal in her concerns, stood. I am not entirely comfortable with this conclusion, she admitted. But I acknowledge that fear-based policy is rarely effective. Perhaps Professor Velkthar is correct that we need to understand rather than simply categorize. Ambassador Morrison nodded. That's all humanity asks. A chance to prove that our nature, while different, can be compatible with galactic peace. As the meeting adjourned, Kevin felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Professor Velkthar approached the three students. Thank you for your contributions, he said. Even though you were not officially part of the proceedings, did we help or make things worse? Kevin asked. The professor's antennae curved in amusement. You prevented panic and open minds, he replied. That is more valuable than you know. As they left the chamber, Lisa put a hand on Kevin's shoulder. You started something important today, she said. Kevin looked back at the conference room where scholars from across the galaxy were still discussing humanity's nature. I just hope we can live up to their trust, he said quietly. 3 days after the faculty meeting, Professor Velkthar sent Kevin a message requesting a private conversation in his office. Kevin arrived to find the Centaurian professor surrounded by holographic displays showing Earth's ecosystems. But unlike the technical data from before, these showed videos of natural landscapes and wildlife. Thank you for coming, Student Martinez, Professor Velkthar said, gesturing to a chair designed for human anatomy. I have been doing additional research, but I find myself with questions that data cannot answer. Kevin sat down. Curious, what kind of questions, Professor? Velkthar's carapace showed colors indicating thoughtful uncertainty. I understand the mechanics of human hunting, he said. The biology, the tools, the techniques. But I do not understand the meaning. What does hunting represent to humans beyond simple survival? Kevin thought about his grandfather, about cold mornings in the Montana mountains, about lessons learned that had nothing to do with killing. It's complicated, he began. For my family, hunting was never just about getting food. Then what was it about? Velkthar asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Kevin pulled up images on his personal device. Photos from his childhood. This is my grandfather, he said, showing a weathered man standing beside a young Kevin in the forest. He taught me to hunt. But most of what he taught me had nothing to do with weapons. He scrolled through more photos. He taught me patience, how to sit still for hours and observe. He taught me to read the land, to notice small changes in animal behavior, to understand weather patterns and seasonal cycles. Professor Velkthar leaned closer. His multiple eyes focused on the images. He taught me respect, Kevin continued, his voice growing softer. Every animal we hunted, my grandfather made sure I understood its role in the ecosystem, its family structure, its importance beyond being our prey. This seems contradictory, Velkthar observed. How can you respect something you intend to kill? Kevin had wrestled with that question himself as a child, because taking a life is serious, he explained. My grandfather taught me that if you're going to hunt, you have to understand what you're taking. You have to make the death as quick and clean as possible, and you have to use everything. Honor the animal's sacrifice. A knock at the door interrupted them. Lisa entered, followed by Ashley Grant, a human ecologist who had just arrived at the university as a visiting researcher. Professor Velkthar invited us, Ashley said, introducing herself. I understand you have questions about human hunting culture. The professor's antennae quivered with what Kevin now recognized as enthusiasm. Yes, I am trying to understand the relationship between humans and the animals they hunt. Ashley pulled up her own research materials. I study conservation ecology. And one of the most interesting things about Earth is that our most effective conservationists are often hunters. She said. Velkthar's colors shifted to puzzlement. How is that possible? Because hunters have skin in the game, Ashley explained. If animal populations collapse, hunters lose something they value. So they advocate for habitat protection, breeding programs, and sustainable harvest numbers. She showed data from various Earth ecosystems in North America. Hunters fund most wildlife conservation through license fees and equipment taxes. Ashley continued. They push for wetland preservation, forest management, and anti-poaching enforcement. Not because they're required to, but because they want healthy ecosystems for future generations. Lisa added her perspective. My family has hunted the same land for 6 generations, she said. We've watched certain species recover from near extinction because hunters demanded protection. We've seen habitats restored because hunting organizations raise money for it. Professor Velkthar was quiet for several moments, processing this information. So human hunting culture includes long-term planning and resource stewardship? Exactly, Kevin confirmed. The best hunters think generations ahead. They want their children and grandchildren to have the same opportunities they had. Brandon arrived, apparently also invited to this gathering. Sorry I'm late, he said. I brought something I thought might help. He activated a holographic recording. An elderly human appeared, sitting on a porch in mountain wilderness. This is my great-uncle, Brandon explained. He's been a hunting guide for 50 years. I asked him to record this for you. Professor, the recording began to play. I've spent my life in these mountains, the old man said, his voice rough but warm. Folks who don't hunt think it's about killing. But anyone who's been at it long enough knows different. He gestured at the forest around him. When you hunt, you become part of the land. You learn to think like the animals, move like them, understand their fears and needs. You stop seeing yourself as separate from nature and start seeing yourself as part of it. Professor Velkthar's full attention was on the recording. The patience you need for hunting teaches you about life. The old hunter continued. You learn that some things can't be rushed, that observation beats action sometimes. That understanding your environment is more important than dominating it. The recording showed footage of the mountains at different seasons. I've watched these peaks for half a century, the man said. I've seen populations rise and fall, watched ecosystems change. And I've learned that everything is connected. The wolves affect the deer affect the plants. The plants affect everything else. He looked directly at the camera. Hunting taught me that I'm just one part of a much bigger system. And if I want that system to survive, I have to protect it. That's why hunters fight so hard for conservation. Because we understand what we could lose. The recording ended, leaving silence in the office. Professor Velkthar's carapace cycled through several color patterns before settling on one Kevin had never seen. I believe I am beginning to understand, the professor said quietly. Human hunting is not merely predation. It is a form of ecological participation. Ashley nodded enthusiastically. That's a perfect way to phrase it. Velkthar stood and began pacing with his 6 legs. Your species evolved to hunt year-round. But you also evolved the intelligence to understand the consequences of overhunting, he said, thinking aloud. This created a culture that values both the skill of the hunt and the wisdom of restraint. Yes, Kevin agreed. My grandfather used to say that anyone can kill an animal, but it takes wisdom to know when not to. The professor stopped pacing. I have a proposal, he announced. Student Martinez, would you be willing to co-teach a section of my xenobiology course on human predatory evolution and hunting culture? Kevin blinked in surprise. You want me to teach? I want you to help me teach, Velkthar corrected. I can provide the biological framework, but you can provide the cultural context that data cannot capture. Lisa grinned. Say yes. This could be really important for human-alien understanding. Kevin looked at his friends. Then at Professor Velkthar, I'll do it, he said. But I want to include practical demonstrations. What kind of demonstrations? The professor asked cautiously. I want to take a group into the university's nature preserve, Kevin explained. Show them how humans track, how we read environmental signs, how we think when we're hunting. Brandon's eyes lit up. You want to demonstrate human persistence hunting techniques in real time? Not hunting exactly, Kevin clarified, but tracking and observation. I want them to see how humans interact with an ecosystem as participants, not just observers. Ashley was nodding. That's brilliant. Experiential learning would give them insights that lectures never could. Professor Velktar's antennae quivered with what Kevin now knew was excitement. This could revolutionize how we teach xenobiology, he said. Most students only learn about predator species through abstract data, but observing human hunting behavior in context would provide unprecedented understanding. 2 weeks later, Kevin stood at the edge of the university's nature preserve with 15 alien students and 3 professors. Today we're going to track the local grazing animals, he explained. Not to hunt them, but to demonstrate how humans interact with prey species. He knelt down, pointing to marks in the soft ground. These are tracks from early this morning, he said. You can tell by how the edges are starting to blur from wind. The depth tells us the animal's approximate weight, and the spacing shows how fast it was moving. The Eltharian student leaned in close. How can you determine all that from mere impressions in soil? Kevin smiled. Practice and observation. Humans have been reading tracks for thousands of generations. We learn to see patterns and make inferences. He led the group through the preserve, stopping frequently to point out signs of animal activity: broken branches, disturbed vegetation, droppings, scattered feathers. Each told a story. This is where 2 animals fought over territory, he said, showing scuffed ground and torn grass. And this is where a family group rested during the heat of the day. Lisa joined the demonstration, showing how to move quietly through terrain and how to position yourself downwind of prey. Hunting isn't about strength or speed, she explained. It's about understanding behavior and using that knowledge strategically. Professor Velkthar observed everything, his carapace showing colors of intense interest after 3 hours. The group returned to the preserve entrance. What you witnessed today, Velkthar said to his students, was human ecological intelligence in action. Student Martinez did not capture any prey, but he demonstrated the observation skills,